PEP Live ran a story on an organization called the Professional Esports Association, or PEA, or P for short, which has launched, and it is an association, where 7 founding teams, which are Team Solomid, Cloud9, Team Liquid, CLG, Count Logic Gaming, Immortals, NRG, and Complexity, have founded this association, which is going to bring forwards North American focus, that's their words, Counter-Strike Global Offensive League, and there will be a 10-week season. There will be 2 weeks, two-day play days per week, and the overall year, next year, 2017, it will have $1 million prize pool spread across it, and Season 1 will have $500,000 prize pool, so presumably Season 2 will as well. Now, there's a lot to break down in the information that comes forward with this, and the quotes, and the overall structure of the company. So, here's a quote from Jason Katz, the PEA commissioner. The PEA represents something new in esports, an association of top teams running their own league and sharing the profits and the decision-making with the players. This has been the architecture of traditional major sports leagues for many decades, but it is a new evolution for esports. This will allow us to finally build a stable, healthy, long-term environment for the players, the community, the media, and the sponsors. Now, for anyone who doesn't know, Jason Katz is someone who's been around esports for quite a while now, at least a decade. He was involved in CGS, which was the first really big attempt to bring esports to cable television in North America, where it was on DirecTV. And it was the famous franchise model. He was someone who was in some way involved with developing the LCS format for League of Legends, which is where they have a North American league that takes place, they have a European league that takes place, and they're separated. And they had a league play that led into playoff system. And he also, most recently, as far as I know, still holds his title, was the chief operating officer of Azubu, the COO. Now, first and foremost, the key detail of this is that, I mean, they're saying it right off the bat. It's a team-owned league. So this is something new for esports. This is something new for Counter-Strike, where it's actually the teams themselves that are starting this league, and that are going to, well, to some degree, I mean, they're not really going to run it, but they're starting the league, and they have ownership in it, and they get direct rev share from it. That's a key point. When this league makes money, makes revenue, these teams will get their share of that money. Now, what's interesting about the way this is set up, and if you look at who is involved with it, so of the teams that are involved with this, every single one of these organizations has at one point been a North American LCS, League Championship Series, front team, and Complexity obviously isn't anymore, but the rest were all within the NALCS last season, in fact. TSM, Cloud9, Team Liquid, CLG, Immortals, NRG, they all have a basis in League of Legends. In fact, most of them come from League of Legends. Now, the reason why that's notable is if you know much about what's going on in the League of Legends scene recently, with the whole dispute between Reginald and Mark Merrill over how teams can make money and what opportunities there are and who should pay more money, which I'll link up here, I discussed in a separate video. Basically, what the League of Legends teams in North America want is they want LCS to come to a position where it has franchising, where they don't get relegated, where they know that their brand's going to be within LCS for many seasons and years to come, and they can build upon that. They want broadcast rights to be sold, so massive amounts of money comes in and revenue's made. Then they want revenue sharing between LCS and Riot Games and between the teams that play in LCS. Now, at the moment, next to none of those things have or are going to happen in LCS. But in this league, because they're taking a direct initiative and they're proactive in how they're going to be owners in this league, all of these things are going to happen. So essentially, in League of Legends, where they've already kind of maximized their exposure and made as much money as they can and got good structure there, and they're limited by Riot Games and how they've structured the league, what they're doing is they're saying, right, well, in this other game, in CSGO, we're going to have all these things we want. This is the dream of what we wanted in League of Legends. And so actually, that's an interesting thing to note here, which is that actually, I think this means that you will see, there already was a trend of more money pouring from these orgs into CSGO than League of Legends, where League of Legends has kind of been tapped out in terms of the saturation of how much you should put in and what you can do to get money out again. CSGO already had the stickers and all the rest of it, but this is another way that you can funnel more of your money into this game, because you are going to have all those things. You're going to have a franchise long term. You're going to have broadcast rights sold in theory. That's one of the things someone like Jason Katz should be here to do. You're going to have obviously sharing of the revenue. You can have direct profits from that. So your players also, so when you pay them a big salary and they get a share of the revenue, now they're making even more money. So in theory, what's interesting about this is you have to know about League of Legends a little bit, but this is the dream of all the League of Legends owners and those orgs in North American LCS, and they're going to try and realize it in CSGO. Now, here's a quote from Jack Etienne, who's the CEO of Cloud9. This marks the end of the Wild West days of esports. The community and players want stability and dependability. Leagues come and go, teams join them and depart, but with the PEA, the teams are making a long-term commitment to be here, playing for the fans for the indefinite future. Now, here's what's interesting about that. Even though they said it's founded by the 7 teams, they're going to make this league, his remarks here essentially directly imply that this is a franchised league. Because look, he says there, leagues come and go, teams join them and depart, but with the PEA, teams are making a long-term commitment to be here. Now, what he's saying there is these teams within this league, Cloud9, TSM, they're going to just be in the league every season. This is a franchise system, as far as we can tell here from what he's saying. Now, an issue I have with that is that means that unlike other leagues, it will not have promotion and relegation. It seems like Complexity can't get relegated if they're very bad. Likewise, is there a promotion opportunity? How do people get into the league? So ultimately, one of the issues with the franchise model is it's less competitive. The people who are in it can be bad and just retain a spot, and it's hard to break into it. So imagine, okay, if I say Immortals now, people are going to think, well, Immortals are in this league. Yeah, the Immortals organization are. But remember, the team for CSGO for Immortals played for Tempo Storm before that. And before that, they were in Games Academy. Now, if Tempo Storm, now Immortals, came along today, and they weren't under Immortals, they were under Tempo Storm or Games Academy, who aren't in a league like this, how would they break into a league like this? How would they get into a position in a league like this if there's not promotion and relegation? Would their org have to get invited later and added to the league, and therefore people would have to share revenue with them, in which case will those original teams let them join? A team like SK Gaming, okay, one of the best teams. Obviously SK Gaming is not in this because they're not a North American organization, right? They're not going to be in this North American league as far as we know. How would it seem like that when they were back in Luminosity, and then before that Keyed Stars, and then before that Kaboom? How would they be able to gain entry to this? Because remember, the key thing about that team was it only took them something like 3 or 4 months before they already made top 8 their first major, before they showed that actually they were already potentially a top 10 level team, and they were hovering around that area. And then after a year, they were one of the best teams in the whole world. How would they have that progression, that trajectory, if this particular league is locked off from them and they're not taking place in it? Now, by the way it was written in the PvP Live article, and the fact that these are the 7 founding teams, all North American orgs, it is a North American focused league. This is a key detail to make, a key point to make that a lot of people seem to be missing, which is it will fracture CSGO. Because, okay, think about ESL Pro League, okay? ESL Pro League features European teams, North American teams. ECS, European teams, North American teams. E-League has teams from all regions in it. This league, North America only. Now, the good thing about EPL, if you follow it, is I don't really care about the North American division online. I don't really care about online anyway. But the good part is the LAN finals brings both the regions. So if there are good North Americans, they compete against the good Europeans, and it's still a very legit title. Now, in this world, does this mean, for example, that these teams just won't compete in ESL Pro League, and maybe this becomes their version of ESL Pro League? Problem is, though, when they finish this season, you just finished the North American one. You don't send any players over to a final because you don't have a European league like this, so there's no corresponding equivalent. It's just North American league. Now, the issue there is that's already less competitive because we know the North American teams are not the best in the world. In fact, since SK, the best team in the world, who are actually from South America, Brazilians, since they are actually a team who aren't going to be in this thing because of being an European org, that means the best team in the world, SK, and the other best teams in the world, which are nearly all the Europeans, are going to be not in this league. The only team in this league at the moment that's a truly world class is Immortals. They're Brazilians, but it's a North American organization. The rest of the teams, okay, some of them, Cloud9, Team Liquid, can break into the top 10 in the world and do well, but they're not going to be competing against them. They're going to be in their own little league, and they're already second and third best teams in there or whatever. So this is not as competitive as other big leagues of this caliber, $1 million, $500,000 per season. And also, it seems to fracture CSGO in some sense going forwards. Now, not because the teams won't play in other leagues, but because in this league, it's fractured in some sense. And some other league's going to have to go. So, okay, here's an interesting part. It said players and owners, this is from the PvP Live part, players and owners will receive an equal 50% share of profits, and each caster will receive shares equal to a player. The PEA will also provide financial benefits to the players, such as retirement services, investment planning, and more. Now, that part does sound very interesting. First of all, that the players and owners get 50% of the share of the profits, as in once the profits come, 50% goes overall to all players, and then that's divided by how many players there are. Casters get an equal share to the players, so it's a way to benefit casters, who at the moment are all freelance in general. There's a few work for companies, and just have freelance rates and negotiate their rate. There's a way to make more money as well from the league and the success of the league. So I expect you'll see certain casters tied to this are already in mind, and they'll be going long term with this sort of a program. And then a key detail I thought was quite interesting is this notion of retirement services and investment planning, because a lot of these players make a lot of money at the moment in CSGO, but they don't invest it well. They lose their money. By the way, it's a common problem in sports where most athletes in sports are broke after only a couple of years after they've finished playing. So I wonder how this will manifest, but the premise at least is interesting, like helping them out with it or directly helping them invest in a certain pension plans or whatever that might be by retirement services. That's probably a good idea overall. Now, there's a quote here where it's Andy Din, who's better known as Reginald in League of Legends, and he's the CEO of TSM. It says, "It's time for leagues to share the rewards and strategic decisions with the players. And the best way for team organizations to do that is for us to do it ourselves. The PEA is a vehicle for us to work shoulder to shoulder with the players, doing what we love." Now then, they then mention that in the management structure, they put an authoritative voice in league operations, that they will sit on a rules committee to help decide competition format, playing rules, prize distribution, and they'll have a grievance committee that will ensure players get help and get to make complaints. Now, that part isn't too different, if you remember, from the WESA situation, where they had like spots on a board, or at least rather they would have representatives in certain scenarios, or their voice would be heard. We don't necessarily know what direct role they have actually in making these decisions. As far as we know at the moment, they get to sit on these things and they get to give their opinion and to help. Notice there it says they will have a voice, they will help, and there will be a grievance committee that ensures they get help and they can make complaints. These are all things where you say something. You don't get a decision, you don't get to do something, you don't necessarily have an actual ability to choose what happens. That's notable to make because when WESA said it, everyone laughed at it. Well, obviously it isn't player orientated, but is it in PEA? I don't know that it is actually. So to explain some of the issues of this league, I actually, believe it or not, have to go over the notion of WESA. So my WESA video was there. Now, when I was breaking down the WESA system, WESA being the World Esports Association, and the kind of end goal, I addressed all these issues. And one of the first primary topics that was an issue was when you hear that name, World Esports Association, it doesn't really live up to the billing. It's not the World Esports Association. It's ESL, some people who represent certain teams in Europe, and then that's it. And then they're going to somehow they're going to, in one day, potentially be involved in what leagues they play in and band together and rev share themselves. It wasn't the World Esports. It wasn't all the teams in the world. It wasn't all the games in the world. And it was actually very much European focused. And it was only one game organizer. And in fact, WESA even said there couldn't be another organizing body involved in it, like another league. There couldn't be an ECS. There couldn't be a FACEIT, whatever. Well, FACEIT is ECS. There couldn't be PGL. There couldn't be MLG. It's just ESL. So its name itself was almost a red herring to a gamer. You're like, well, that's not what it means. In fact, you're trying to lie to me almost, trying to trick me. So WESA, the end goal, you have to understand, was about banding together these European organizations with a European tournament organizer, ESL, in some sense, in what's essentially a joint venture to then one day be able to sell broadcasting rights for leagues, etc., to people like television, people who might come in with not just millions of dollars like you can make now in esports, but billions of dollars, like you see from traditional sports when those broadcasting rights are sold. So it was a way to band together and have ESL negotiate for you to sell the TV rights, and once you make those billions, ideally, you're going to then rev share it amongst all the people within this association, and that's how everyone's going to make money, and that's what everyone's playing for. That's the end goal, that's the end game, that's the long-term purpose of this sort of organization. So it's similar with PEA. Difference was WESA is European, PEA is North American. Now, the name of WESA to gamers is disingenuous. It's not what it means. It isn't going to live up to that purpose. It's not that they're going to build it into that one day. But actually, the name itself is genius for the whole end game. Remember, the end game is not you or I. They're not trying to convince us it's good or sell anything to us or make any of their money from us. Who are they trying to make it from? The people who might buy the broadcast rights from them one day. So for the person who comes along and wants to buy the broadcast rights, if they hear about esports, they get involved in it, and someone comes to them and gives them a really great pitch, and the name is WESA, and they say, we're the World Esports Association, and we can sell these rights to the best league in the world, that sounds fantastic. That sounds like you're the FIFA of your game. That's what they were trying to present as, remember? And everyone's like, this isn't FIFA. You're trying to sound like you're the FIFA, and the name suggests you are, and then if you have the top teams and you have an organization like ESL behind you, seems like you have all the backing, right? And you have have a league and you have the top teams, and you have the rev share thing. This must be the FIFA. We'll buy the broadcasting right. We'll get the broadcasting rights from them, buy them from them, and then they'll make all the money. So that's the whole point of these two organizations. Notice WESA didn't call themselves European CSGO or Association. Same as this one didn't call themselves North American Professional Esports Association. They just called themselves Professional Esports Association. Interesting to note when you consider the end game that we're talking about here. Then you've got to consider that a key detail of the ESL and WESA thing, which was a bit unfortunate, was that everyone went ham on ESL and WESA and was like, this is bullshit, this is a piece of shit. Notice all those other organizations were very quiet, right? ECS didn't say a whole lot. People who ran other leagues didn't say a whole lot. Part of the reason why is there were already other people within the scene when ESL did this, trying to make their own associations like PEA while WESA was going on. They just hadn't gotten theirs out and publicly announced it yet. ESL were the first ones there. So ESL took all the flack. Now I hear all these people like, oh, this is great, PEA. Oh, this is going to make it more professional. This is going to be better. I haven't heard any good reasons yet as to why it'll be better for the fan. Maybe it can be better for the org. Well, it certainly will be if they make money. Maybe it can be better for the player to some degree. But why would it be better for the fan? No explanation. So one of the big issues with this for me is that not only is this going to happen, but there'll probably be other orgs, other collections of people try to do this. I mean, the only time we've seen something similar to this to me is in South Korea when KESPA arrived, the Korean Esports Association, and they have had something to do with the broadcasting rights and organizing the teams, etc. It's just that that's not necessarily like the teams owning everything. That's like the companies who own some of the teams. It's like more of a hierarchical structure. Now, there's also the fact that when you talk about this issue, PEA shares some of the problems and potential problems and some of the issues that WESA shares. So, for example, this is not a player-owned or player-driven league. They also, like WESA, tried to present it that this is about players and working with players and giving players a voice. And yet, remember, players do not own anything in this league, to my knowledge, just as they don't in WESA. What happens is players share revenue within this league. That's true. But here's the thing, if you're an Immortals player, so you're Bolts, or you're a Cloud9 player, you're nothing. At the moment, if you're in this league for Season 1, you now get your share of the revenue. But let's say you leave Cloud9 and you go to a team, so let's pick one out of thin air, shall we? You leave Cloud9 and nothing gets cut from that and no other team in the league wants him, and he goes to Selfless, actually. And when he joins Selfless, a North American org, they aren't in PEA at the moment, so he doesn't get any percentage of the revenue anymore. He doesn't own anything to do with that league. He should have a different player elsewhere. And whoever he's replaced by in Cloud9, let's say it's a player who's never played there, let's say Disco Dopplan comes over to North America, he now gets to share of that. So players don't anyway own or drive this league. They're going to be listened to and they're going to make money in a way that we're not sure that they're making the WESA system. It seems like they don't. That's a positive. But all we've done now is take the hierarchical structure of power, and instead of it being the tournament organizer, like in the old days, ESL, ECS, who make all the money, and then you just play in their league. They get the sponsors, they make the money, and they get any revenue, and then you just play in their league and try and win prize money. Now we've taken it down a level of ownership, so now the players own part of the structure as well, and make part of the revenue as well, make part of the money, and now they share some of the money with the players to keep the players happy. It's a better scenario for them, but it's not the same as if the players also owned a share of it. And by the way, just as a little note to people who are orgs and tournament organisers and everything, this is unfair. I actually, by the way, am not in favour of players necessarily owning the league, or think that they should do, or think that players should somehow get an equal cut to also the teams and also to the orgs who run all these things. There's a certain level of innovation, ability to execute plans, understanding of what decisions to make, etc. That means maybe people higher up the hierarchy sometimes should make more money. Just being a very good player, while it should certainly earn you a lot of money for your talents, hopefully relative to how good you are and your market value, I don't necessarily think you should all make equal. I'm not in favour of that sort of a business model. I like innovation being rewarded and the ability to execute very difficult things in a very precise, nuanced and effective manner. So this is really an org-driven league. That's the key deal to make. Team-driven league, not player-driven league. Now, a key issue that happens here, not just in terms of fracturing, is that the reason why fracturing almost has to happen between North America and Europe in a league like this is because how many leagues and competitions can we really have in CSGO? How many can survive into 2017? 10-week leagues, think of them. So we've got EPL, ESL Pro League. We've got this one now, Professional Esports Association League, whatever that might end up being called. ECS runs a competition that's an online league into a LAN finals. E-League has a purely offline league, but they have a league that takes a few months to run. You can't figure we can live in a world where these four could all exist at once. You have to figure at least one of them probably has to drop and won't have a North American division to make way for this one, or might just drop entirely and people focus in this particular sense. The fact it's called PEA also, unless they're doing it for the WESA reason to get the broadcasting right aspect, maybe that also means in the future they'll take over the European aspect. But seems unlikely, since surely with the ownership structure, then we'd have to have European teams owned in here. And if the ones that are in WESA at the moment, most of the best teams in the world, by the way, Fnatic, VP, Na'Vi, etc., are they going to go and leave that and go to another league? Can you even be in both at the same time? Seems unlikely, right? Seems like there's a war brewing between the two factions. So forget just those leagues, and which certainly one of them's going to have to drop. There's not enough weeks in the year. There's not enough play days in a week to have all these leagues. But it seems to me like people from the old days of CSGO, like StarLadder, they're just done as far as online leagues are gone. Because remember, they used to have a long online season that led into their LAN finals, and people used to famously drop out and just quit if they didn't want to go to the LAN, even if they qualified. Feels to me like that can't happen anymore. For me, StarLadder probably has to be just an invitational event. It has to be one LAN event on one weekend, and that's it. It can't have an online season. There's too many already. People like DreamHack, a year ago, 2 years ago, the big tournament organizers in CSGO was ESL, it was DreamHack, and then you added in a third. Was it Face It? Yeah, they were getting pretty big. PGL were hanging around the outside. MLG did the odd event. Now, it's ESL, it's E-League, it's PEA, and it's ECS. There's no room for DreamHack within this structure. DreamHack can do the odd event. They can't be on that tier one, though. They're the obvious one to drop off. They don't have an online league anyway. They're running LAN events as it is. They probably can't get all the teams for the LAN events because how much time's going to be used up with those other tournaments there. And with it being owned by MTG, just like ESL is, feels like MTG, not MSL. MTG was going to emphasize the ESL side rather than the DreamHack side. So it feels like DreamHack's going to drop down with StarLadder and those smaller events to being the tier 2 or tier 3 of the scene, which they already kind of are at the moment with DreamHack Summer, but it's going to be hard for them to maintain that top status. Now, with that said, maybe if they manage those Masters events like we had in Malmö, and they're apparently going to have another one soon, maybe if they manage those well, we can just have the odd DreamHack event that gets a lot of the top teams and is like an event that happens once off. But they can't be as big a power play as they were before, seemingly. Also, this makes me wonder, how will majors work? Like, will it only be these teams that can get chosen over a major? If they have a major, will the major just be the league? As in you play the league down and then somehow you qualify into the major? If these people are going to run majors as well, how will they do that and run their online league? There's a lot of questions still to be figured out here. And in that sense, maybe people like DreamHack and Starlight can live if they get majors. Maybe that's a way to stay relevant in the scene. So there's a lot of questions to be asked. And I feel like ultimately, the best way to describe the PEA versus the WESA situation is that WESA did a really bad job with their PR. And a lot of the things they said were quite disingenuous. Now, some of the things that have been said here certainly are pushing certain narratives that aren't quite reasonable. Like when I did that translation on the part about the players, you could see that the terms they were using sounded like the players had more control and more of an input than they necessarily do. They can be entirely ignored in theory, although they'll make money through the revenue share system. So in general, I think this just shows, first and foremost, there's another faction exists. By the way, right now, if I had to choose between the two, WESA has way better teams in Counter-Strike Global Offensive than PEA does. What happened is the PR work from the guys from PEA was way better than WESA's. They did a much better job there, and the difference is they sold it in this article to the players and to the competitive scene people like you and I who listen to it, and we can understand what they're saying. Whereas WESA, it's like they almost use the kind of PR that they're using for the top level bigwigs of the television companies, but then tried to sell that to us and thought we would buy these terms and that we would get tricked into thinking they were FIFA when obviously they aren't. Now, I will point out, one key detail for me, though, is at the moment, I'm very interested to see what can happen with PEA versus WESA. Because if the two end up making separate leagues, and if, for example, PEA people don't play in ESL things, because ESL's in some indirect way connected to WESA, I think actually that helps the guys from ESL more than it helps the PEA guys, because they'll make profit and they'll have their own league and they'll definitely be successful and popular because people love North American Counter-Strike. There's a lot of North American fans, but I actually think that they'll be the lesser league because they have the worst teams right now. The ESL WESA one has much more the better all-time great teams and top teams right now. There's also the factor that if you're going to draw these factions between North America and Europe, add in the other teams that haven't joined a WESA type thing yet. And if they join a WESA type thing and all North Americans join PEA, again, the WESA one with the European teams is winning out in that one. They have a better quality of Counter-Strike. Then you've got to add in that when you look at the two LCS, okay, so European LCS has always been very good just because of the amount of talent in Europe. They can always find new talent to make top teams and top players, etc. But the NALCS has remained good because they had more money in their orgs. The people like TSM had more orgs than your Fnatics and Gambits of Europe. And so they were able to buy better players. So they bought Korean players in League of Legends. They bought the top European talent sometimes in League of Legends. That won't be possible in PEA, because even though they have a lot of money in North American organizations, some of these teams and orgs over in Europe have better players and just as much money. There's not the same divide in the same sense necessarily. So I don't know that they can make up the gap by having more money and just taking over the players from the European side of things. So the fracture that can happen between the two continents and regions is certainly very interesting. Now, hopefully it doesn't happen entirely. Like, what's good is, unlike LCS, there will be multiple tournaments still within a year. So it's not like there is only LCS, and if it's split into EU and NA, you don't get to see them play except at the equivalent of a World Championship. We'll still have majors. There'll still be other leagues that have all the teams playing in them. But certainly, as we go forwards in the future, if people are going to be able to sell broadcast rights and make billions and fracture the leagues off like this and draw these battleground lines, and you have to join one or the other, it will be interesting. But personally, for me, it makes it less competitive. I'm not quite as interested in the quality of the play, because I don't think it'll be as good, unfortunately.
Hey guys, Tempest here. Just a friendly Canadian reminder to keep force spying, and you're watching Thorin's YouTube.